Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on News 6. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. According to Ukrainian regional officials, Russia has launched an overnight drone attack on Ukraine's Odessa region. Reports show attack has injured 4 people, including 3 children. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv is discussing possible U.S. troop presence with Washington as security guarantees. He has also signaled readiness to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in any format to end the war. Thailand has released 18 Cambodian soldiers detained since July under a renewed ceasefire agreed over the weekend, ending 20 days of border clashes. As the truce holds, Cambodian officials Meli Socheta has said that the soldiers were handed over after 155 days in custody, while Thailand has said they were treated under international humanitarian law. Myanmar's military junta said just over 50% of eligible voters took part in the first phase of a 3-stage national election at the weekend. The first since the 2021 coup. While the turnout is still sharply lower than the previous 2 polls, the vote is being held amid a civil war, while the UN has criticized that the election is neither free nor fair. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that he sees eye to eye with the United States on the need for Hamas disarmament. He adds that a new government in Gaza is possible if Hamas is disarmed. The United Arab Emirates said it is withdrawing its remaining counter-terrorism forces from Yemen as rift between the UAE and Saudi deepens. The escalation came after Saudi-led coalition forces struck the port of Mukalla, marking the most serious clashes yet between Saudi-backed forces and UAE-aligned southern separatists. In Iran, protests over rising cost of living spread to universities, with students joining shopkeepers and merchants. This comes as the government offers talks with demonstrators amid growing unrest across Tehran. China's Air China and its subsidiary have signed a deal with Airbus to buy 60 A320 Neojets worth about $9.5 billion at list prices, with deliveries scheduled from 2028 to 2032. Now we start with Asia. Myanmar has held the first phase of its national election, with just over half of eligible voters casting ballots, remarkably lower than previous elections. The vote is the first since the 2021 coup and takes place during a civil war, with reports expecting the military-aligned party to retain power. International bodies and human rights groups have criticized the election as not free or fair. Citing the ban on anti-junta parties and restrictions on criticism, the junta has reported that more than 6 million people have voted across 102 townships, while future rounds are scheduled for January 11th and then January 25th. Aung San Suu Kyi, who remains detained, and her party has been dissolved, with the military continuing to control the electoral process. Now for this discussion, we welcome Ms. Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Dasgupta, for joining us once again. Good to see you. Now, looking at Myanmar's elections, as you know, it's still holding on peacefully. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, the piece is only superficial, Soma. Thank you so much for inviting me. But what I do understand is that the sham is of the multipolarity of the elections. The NLD has been dissolved, as you have noted. Anti-junta parties have been disbanded. People have been there. Any kind of anti-election propaganda has been allows them to jail people, basically. There have been coercion into voting also. Their UN rights officers have noted pleas by citizens where they have been said that their houses will be bombed if they don't go out and vote. So the coercion is obvious. Even in the first phase, the pro-military group USDP, I believe they are called, and they are already claiming victory, and they are a pro-military group, and this is just basically taking away the sham of the military regime in Myanmar and giving the world a face to say that yes, things are going fine. The Chinese observers are saying that yes, it's a good progress from military regime to a democratic regime. The Indian observers are not there in official capacity. They're only there available on private invitation basis only, and they've decided not to comment on it as of now. So people are being pushed to vote, probably for all we know, pushed to vote in a certain direction. Anti-junta material, anti-election material is a jailable offense, and so we can't say that these elections are free and fair, since not all parties or all viewpoints are incorporated in it.
Right, and although this very limited and also full of controversies and this not democratic election holds on, and it is happening, so how will the results affect the legitimacy of Myanmar's post-coup elections and prospects for any democratization?
Well, it's going to continue more of the same. Only thing is that the person who will be heading the government will not be the one standing in uniform. That is the only difference that's going to be. The policies are going to be directed by the military, because the party that is slated to win as almost a fixed election is going to be one that is going to follow the diktats sent out by the military dictator of the junta regime. So we are not in a position to say that there's going to be any changes in Myanmar except superficially on paper. The face might change, but the voice and the words are going to be the same as they have been since 2021's coup.
Right. And in building on your first answer for my first question, you touched on China. So why is China commenting over here that it is peaceful and the elections are
free and fair?
Yes.
I do believe China is looking for to put out the message that the junta regime is holding free and fair elections, and Myanmar situation is normalized, because it helps them keep control of the Chin regions, where I believe, or at least most of the international analyst community believes, is under unofficial Chinese rule. And that is where most of their rare earth element farming is happening from, and that is a very, very environmentally destructive process, and that can only be done when there is not a people representative army at the helm of things. So they want the junta regime, because that's the regime that kind of bows to them. So they want the junta regime to be legalized by the form of this USDP front of the junta regime in the elections, and this is how they are going to accomplish presenting to the world that look, it is no longer dictator controlled, and everything that is happening by the will of the people. So they are presenting it as a border security premise, but the internal dynamics of it is just leeching away the resources of the region while ensuring that an armed military group stays in control of the nation.
With that, I would like to thank Ms. Dasgupta for joining us today and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Africa. Guinea's junta chief Mamadi Doumbouya has been declared as the elected president after securing a sweeping majority of the vote. Doumbouya received 86.72% of the first round vote, and the voter turnout was reported at nearly 81%. The election was marked by the exclusion of major opposition leaders and accusations of irregularities, including restricted access for poll observers, alleged ballot stuffing, and pressure on voters. However, the vote followed a constitutional change, allowing junta members to run and extending presidential terms from 5 to 7 years. Doumbouya has promised not to seek the office after seizing power in 2021 coup, but his candidacy was allowed under the new rules. On the other hand, the opposition groups have criticized the election as a charade and called for the restoration of civilian rule. Let's listen in.
Après centralisation, vérification et compilation des résultats provisoires du premier tour du scrutin présidentiel du 22 décembre 2025, agissant dans le strict respect de la légalité, proclame le candidat, M. Mamadi Doumbouya, candidat du GM2, ayant recueilli la majorité absolue des suffrages valablement exprimés, est déclaré élu à l'élection présidentielle du 28 décembre 2025 à titre provisoire, sous réserve de la validation de la Cour suprême, seule juridiction compétente pour en connaître définitivement.
Now, for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Eric Shiaka. He's a journalist, joins us live from Kigali. Thank you very much, Mr. Shiaka, for joining us. Welcome to News6 World. Now, looking at this, what more can you tell us about this Guinea's latest elections, and also how does this, allowing junta members to run affect the legitimacy of the electoral process over there?
Well, thank you. So looking at these elections, especially happening, considering that when this junta took, when the junta took over the administration, they were promising to return the nation to the civilian rule, but it was overturned later on, allowing the incumbent Mamadou Doumbia to run for office. But he's been quite popular, considering that they topped the government that was unpopular, promising to do reforms that will shape the country, which was at the time being decayed by Sahel wars and a lot of economic issues. But having again broken the promise of not running, it shows a pattern within the politics, the politics happening in the Western Africa, where military rule take over, promise to give back the administration to the civilian rule, but again breaking that promise and take the power for themselves. So this is nothing new, considering what you've seen in countries like Mali and other AS nations. So Doumbia, yes, expected to win, but of course, in an election that most of the opposition leaders were bare to run. So there's nothing new.
Right. And how do you think this, the fact that, opposition leaders, many of them who were not allowed to run, and the control, the strict restrictions over these voters, how do you think this will be impacting the international implications of Doumbouya's role?
So Doumbouya, of course, it was expected, considering that he took power in 2021, and also considering that majority of the big opposition figures either fled or were arrested and were put into jail. So coming to this election was just kind of justifying the military rule that is already ruling Guinea. So the opposition, they are the mercy of the incumbent, they're the mercy of the military, and what was just was a show of democracy, but deep down they know this was already expected. Mamadou Doumbia was expected to win, and now what they have to do is, do they have to keep running with the politics, playing politics with the incumbent, or they reorganize and perhaps call on international observers and international players to help their case?
And will African Union or ECOWAS or any other organization be able to help, with Guinea's, Guinea's elections and political stability?
They haven't really, so at the moment, there have not been any statement from the African Union yet regarding the Guinea's presidential elections. But what I expect mostly is after the elections, after the final results are announced, which of course Mamadou Doumbia is expected to win the rate of above 80%. So African Union might approve, but it doesn't matter. We have seen it so far. Either African Union or any other regional body organizations, whenever they announce, it's just it doesn't change anything. So either they welcome the results of the election, even if they don't, it doesn't mean that it will affect anyhow the rule of Mamadou Doumbia as the president of Guinea-Conakry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shiaka, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay in the region. Now, moving on to Congo. Congo is gearing up for another closely watched presidential election as veteran leader Denis Sassou Nguesso announces he will seek re-election in March 2026. Nguesso, who has dominated the country's politics for decades, has been endorsed by the ruling Congolese Labour Party following a three-day party congress. Sassou Nguesso has first led the oil-rich nation under a one-party system from 1979 to 1992. He then returned to power in 1997 after a civil war and has since won elections in 2002, 2009, 2016, and 2021. The upcoming election is set for March 22, with military personnel voting 5 days earlier to maintain public order. Opposition parties, including the Rally for Democracy and Development, the Republicans Movement, and the People's Party, have joined forces to form the Alliance for Democratic Change in 2026. They aim to challenge long-standing rule and push for reforms in Congo's electoral system. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Eric Shiaka. He's a journalist joined us live from Kigali. Thank you very much, Mr. Shiaka, for staying with us. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the history of who is and how does Denis Nguesso's decades-long rule shaping the country in Congo, and also the perceptions of any electoral legitimacy and democratic rule there?
Thank you. If you talk about Denis Sassou Nguesso ruling over the Congo Brazzaville, or not, some people confuse it with the Democratic Republic of Congo, but they're two different countries, just neighbors. So Nguesso came into power in the 70s, and then I think it was later on defeated, and then came back again in power and in 1997. Since then, he has been in power. He's among the longest serving African presidents. There have been elections so far in Congo, and actually, majority of people of the observers say they were quite democratic. But again, having to run, he's won for over 4 terms, which were organized in the Congo. So this is going to be his 5th term to run into office, and considering that he's actually 82 years old, in a continent that is ruled by, has majority of the young people, mostly under 35, this is still one of the key hindrance to what many critics say is a key hindrance to the development of the continent, especially having leaders who don't want to step down after they have served their terms. Nguesso also has for many times held a referendum where they have changed the constitution, last time allowing him to run after the constitution, the earlier constitution said that they above 70 people, above the age of 70 were not allowed to run. So he changed that so that I can be able to run, and this time it's not going to be any different. He's expected to win.
Right. Thank you for highlighting the voter or the how there are many young people in Congo who are maybe underrepresented because of current rule. And what impact could this formation of the Alliance for Democratic Change in 2026 have on opposition strategies and political competition for this current government?
So the alliance, yes, they might form, they might gain a little bit of ground in elections, maybe win some regions, but overall, if you look at the ground, and obviously considering the previous elections where Nguesso ran, they're not going to change much because the ruling party, the PTC, the Congolese Labour Party, has been winning elections ever since Andeso came back from the after being defeated in 1997. So the alliance was one way, of course, to gaining ground and, of course, putting their efforts together to see if they can beat the PTC this time around. But it's an actual sales. I don't think that is going to happen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eriks, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to South Sudan's army has ordered to evacuate civilians from the areas controlled by opposition forces in Jonglei state in the east to avoid being used as human shields as the fighting between the two camps intensifies. South Sudan People's Defense Forces spokesperson Lulruai Kwong has stated that civilians should leave areas near military barracks, assembly points, and rally sites. According to reports, 30 people were injured in the attacks as the fighting between SSPDF and Sudan People's Liberation Army in opposition has escalated since December 24th of 2013, after SPLA-IO forces ran a military position in Wad, a town in Jonglei state. However, the evacuation notice has affected three countries, Niyirol, Uror, and Akobo, located in Jonglei. The latest clashes come amid the gradual collapse of a fragile power-sharing deal between President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar, stoking fears of a renewed slide into civil war. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Eric Shaka. He's a journalist, joins us live from Kigali. Thank you very much, Mr. Shaka, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, how does this forced evacuation, is it better for, as it is going to be for their safety, but how will be this impacting the humanitarian and also political dimensions of conflict in South Sudan?
Right. So South Sudan, again, the humanitarian crisis is still fragile in that place. As we know, the power sharing agreement signed in 2018 between the incumbent president Salva Kiir and former vice president, now leader of opposition, Riek Machar, has not really stood ground. Yes, there have been peace, but still fragility has been always there, considering that there have been fightings here and there within the Southern Sudan army. Excuse me, there's a helicopter flying over my house, but can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, don't worry, I can hear you. Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Eriks. Yes, we can hear you, yeah.
So this power sharing agreement has not hold, it's still fragile because we've seen faction between the South Sudanese People's Liberation Army and South Sudanese People's Liberation Army in opposition, the IO, fighting which one is for the president, the incumbent president, and the other one for Riek Machar. So a lot of players in the region have called these two people, the president and the former vice president, to maintain peace and to call on their factions to halt fighting and and have a ceasefire. But of course, this new development also just shows that this is still fragile, and the people in this region are still suffering, also causing a lot of humanitarian crisis. So there have been an accusation of each faction using civilians as a human shield. So the government calling on the other opposition, the other faction, to let civilians be evacuated, so that in times of fighting, there won't be a lot of casualty. We are yet to see what will happen if the leaders in opposition will allow the civilians to evacuate the places they currently hold.
Yes, and what are the strategic implications? As you said, peace has been fragile there, and the clashes are intensifying. And the South Sudan's fragile power sharing agreement, and also how might this use of civilian areas as potential military zone influence international responses now?
Yeah, so there've been key players like IGAD. There's been another player like within the African Union, and also the UN has been a major player in bringing these two factions together. But we have to consider that South Sudan is one of the actually the youngest country in Africa, just got the independence in 2021 after the referendum, which is a breakaway from the Sudan. So that whole region, within itself, is also going through difficult times. You have Sudan in the north that is having its own issues, especially Bigo that is having a lot of civilian casualties, and then you have neighbors in the Horn that are also going in Ethiopia, Eritrea, all that area within the Horn and neighborhood are just having quite troubled times geopolitically. So these new fightings or these new call for evacuation of civilians will, of course, alert the international players, especially the UN and the neighboring countries. I mean, countries like Uganda, which borders in South Sudan in the south, and Kenya, which mostly are the ones that usually have a lot of influx of refugees fleeing these conflicts. So it's going to raise some alarms, and African Union and IGAD might play a crucial role in bringing together these two factions.
With that, I would like to thank Mr. Eric Shaka for joining us from Kigali today and sharing that insight throughout our news in NewsX World. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. NASA's Artemis 2 astronauts have successfully completed a full launch day rehearsal at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The exercise included suiting up in their orange flight suits, walking out to the launch pad, boarding the Orion spacecraft, and running through a complete countdown simulation. The rehearsal tested all system safety protocols and crew procedures ahead of the mission. The crew, including NASA astronauts Victor Glover, Reid Wiseman, Christina Koch, and Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen, are set to fly around the moon in early 2026. However, this will be NASA's first crewed lunar mission in over 50 years. Ground teams, engineers, and mission controllers monitored every step, confirming readiness for the historic journey around the moon. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.